Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Leading on the Frontlines podcast. I am Dan Hornacek, your host. Sorry about last week. I did realize that I forgot to mention that I wasn't going to be recording. It was my wife and I's wedding anniversary that week, along with just a bunch of kid stuff going on, and I honestly just didn't have time. So I apologize for that, but we're back this week. One thing I want to tackle with everyone as far as a topic is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart is why fear-based management sucks. Um, so we're going to explore, obviously on this podcast, we kind of explore and look at effective management strategies and leadership principles. This is one that I really, really want to focus on. I know I've mentioned it in a few different episodes. I kind of want to put a little more of a focus on it this week. So we're going to dive into the topic again, fear-based management and why it doesn't work. Fear-based management as a whole is a very prevalent approach, and a lot of leaders use it, honestly, sometimes without even realizing it, or they see a positive impact initially, so they kind of fall into the pattern of utilizing fear-based management. However, research actually shows and experience have shown that the approach is really ineffective, and actually it's detrimental to both employee well-being and organizational success. There's actually a really cool article. I'll put the link in the notes of the podcast, but the website worklife.news put out an article on this late last year in November, and one of the things in there that I thought was very interesting is that fear-based leaders lose an estimated about 10 hours a week in productivity. If you look at, and you can kind of break that down to your specific workers, but if you really look at how that's per person, right? So you're losing billions per year potentially, if not thousands of dollars, per week, just from trying to utilize fear-based management. And don't get me wrong, fear can be a good energizer, right? It can be kind of a good little nudge, but overall, I mean, if we're talking about how much energy people can gain from it, it's pretty limited, and should be only utilized honestly when it's specifically necessary. So to kind of kick it off, let's look at the reasons why people look at fear-based management tactics. One of the main reasons is that, or why these fail, excuse me. One of the main reasons is that it creates a negative work environment as a whole. So overall, you're creating, this stigma within your team. You're creating this like Johnny Raincloud effect, if you will, amongst everyone who works with you. When employees are constantly living in fear, their creativity, motivation, productivity, they all suffer, and it really suppresses innovation and collaboration, and could lead really just to stagnation in a toxic workplace culture. Because you're not motivating people by positive or incentive or anything else. You're just doing it out of straight fear. And I think this is a really good point. And it's not just the negative impact on the employees. Fear-based management also hinders like long-term organizational success. And employees who are being led in this manner are more likely to leave your job. And high turnover rates is a terrible thing for any company. I know when I was in operations specifically, the goal was 30%, or under was the goal. And even that is high if you're looking at more of a, office related turnover percentage. Operations, typically you have a frontline employee. So those honestly are kind of a dime a dozen to a certain effect, but really, having high turnover rates, turnover is not only going to affect morale of your team, but it's also going to incur significant costs for hiring and training replacements. And I think that's something a lot of managers don't understand, is that if you have high turnover rates, just in general, you need to look at the cost. How much does it actually cost to hire an employee? And everyone's like, well, it only costs me, X amount. But you have to calculate in there the training process too, because until they're a full-fledged independent employee, they're still costing the organization money. And so by again, leading with fear, you're going to have more turnover. Because why would you start a job? Really, like you're more apt to leave a job if you just started and you're like, wow, all this person tries to do is make me feel like I'm going to lose my job by utilizing fear, or that like a benefit's going to be taken away from, or things are changing within the employment agreement. So, and two, fear-based management creates a culture of compliance rather than commitment. Right? You're not creating a culture. You're not, motivating your team to do better. They're just being compliant with what you're asking, and really they're going to be just giving you the bare minimum. The focus at that point is avoiding punishment than actively contributing to the organization's goals. And I think there's still out there some older generations that are like good. That they really kind of fall on the side of like they should always be fearful, and I think that's terrible. I don't think you should always be looked at as replaceable. I think we all bring unique value to our jobs, and if your leaders aren't capable of seeing that, then they're terrible leaders. I'll be the first to tell you that. So the compliance-based approach, it really stifles that creativity, problem solving, and ultimately hampers innovation and growth. Because if you have people who are only focusing on being compliant due to being led by fear, why would they, stick their neck out on being creative? Why would they take it upon themselves to problem solve when that could potentially cause more fear to be unleashed on them, whether that be goals, or if you don't hit your goals, then this is going to happen, things like that. And I think that's a really, really good point. So, now that we've talked about those things and some of the negative things that can happen due to fear-based management, I think it's important to talk about alternative approaches and to effective leadership in this kind of situation. So, and this is going to be kind of repetitive to what I've talked about, but I think it's very important. You need to create a culture of psychological safety. And I kind of was like, whoa, I'm not a psychologist, things like that. But really, it's crucial to creating an environment where employees feel safe, right? To take risks, to voice their opinions, collaborate, to fail, and then learn from their failures. When employees feel that safety, especially in their workplace where they're spending, to be honest, the majority of their life, they're more likely to contribute their best work, to collaborate effectively, and share those innovative ideas where they're not going to if they feel like they might be punished for doing so. And that takes a lot. That takes a lot from, a management perspective, because if you're collaborating or sharing ideas, you have to be minding your P's and Q's on your responses to your employees. Like, are you being, rude? Are you being open to ideas? Maybe during, and this happened to me a couple times, maybe during a brainstorm session, or even just a collaboration with a project that's been started, maybe you come to find that your original idea isn't the best. That's sometimes a hard pill to swallow, especially as a person who's in a management position. But I think by swallowing that pill, it makes you look even better, because you're open and you're fostering that idea that it's okay to talk about these things. And it allows you to, listen to your employees. You can, at that point, provide constructive feedback. You can empower them to kind of take ownership of that particular work that they're doing. You can give them more independence and responsibility, and not only like in the sense like of giving more responsibility with the same pay. That's not really what we're talking about here. But for me, if I was able to kind of be like, puff my chest up a little bit and be like, this was my baby, or this was my thing, and it was difficult to work through, but now look what I created. That type of ownership really helps create employees that are going to be more productive just because they feel important to their manager, because their manager recognizes what the value they're bringing to the team. I mean, who doesn't like that? It makes you feel important, and everyone likes to feel important to a certain extent. So again, it fosters a sense of trust with you, accountability, and growth. It's really all positive things. The accountability aspect, I think, is really cool because, and I think it's kind of a unique way to look at accountability, because by offering the safety to express ideas and collaborate with others, or even just fail and things like that, it creates this dialogue and this comfortability with one another. So if there is a significant failure or something where accountability does need to be instituted at that point, it's a lot easier of a conversation, for one, and then for two, you can utilize that as a learning experience too. So I mean, it's kind of like, some things just have to be done due to rules that are set in place regarding accountability. And I think by having that safety amongst your employees, that it brings the drama down a bit with that accountability. And additionally with this, and this kind of ties into what I was just talking about, effective communication obviously is going to build a positive work environment. It always does. There's no, you cannot convince me that you can't, or that you can over communicate. It's not possible. Communication within your team, within other teams, like there's no, like, I will fight to the death on this hill on you cannot over communicate. And realistically, leaders should encourage open and transparent communication, not just between themselves and their employees, but within the separate teams, everything. It should be very open and transparent. And feedback, this is more so between you and your employees. It should flow freely where ideas are welcomed. Obviously you don't want to be questioned on every single thing that you do, but I think it's important for your employees to understand the why behind the what, meaning you need to do this and here is why. Again, this it really goes just back to, if you're just promoting dialogue of collaboration and creativity, and that gives your employees a sense of belonging, because if they're sitting there doing a job and they don't understand why they're doing it, it's very easy to create resentment for that job. Understanding and taking the time to talk about and focus on the why, I think is just so important with tasks, no matter how menial, because it might be very important, but they don't know how important or what it affects. And it could be so simple to them and so, just unimportant, but it has importance to you. If you don't take the time to explain why, you can't expect them to take it as seriously or with such importance. One of the things, I want to do, as we wrap up this week's episode, is kind of summarize the key takeaways as a why. Again, fear-based tactics don't work. It creates a negative work environment. It erodes trust. It leads to high employee turnover. Taking the alternate approaches that we talked about, fostering that culture of psychological safety, coaching and supporting your employees, and promoting that effective communication between your employees and you, your employees and each other, and your employees and other teams, I think is very important. By implementing all these things, you're going to really create a positive and productive work environment. Going back to what I said before, I mean, if you're losing 10 hours of productivity, just think of how much more could be getting done if you just stopped threatening your people. I think that if you're looking at productivity drops and that's how you're managing your people, because that's all you got, you really need to take a hard look in the mirror as far as how to get people motivated and working. So, yeah, so thank you for listening. I really enjoy talking about how fear-based management fails, and how they don't work. I hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. I would love to hear your feedback on anything that I said on here, so feel free to, add me on Instagram or follow me on Instagram, add me on X, or on my YouTube, whichever you want to jump on. Leading on the Frontlines is the handle for the Instagram and YouTube, leading the front for X, formerly known as Twitter. So again, Dan Hornacek, leading the Frontlines. Glad to be back after a week off. You guys have a great day.